Hello, I'm Dr. Lipi and welcome to my show, Health, Humor, and Harmony. Question: what do a cartoonist and celebrity chef have in common? This is not the setup for a joke, but rather the premise of today's show, which I'm filming in New Delhi, India, the birthplace of my parents. It's very appropriate as I'll be interviewing Indian American Vishavjit Singh, a comic book artist known for his superhero alter ego, Sikh Captain America, and Vikas Khanna, celebrity chef, author, and host of MasterChef India, and the first Indian chef to receive a Michelin star. Vishavjit and Vikas have teamed up to create American Sikh, an Oscar-qualified animated short film about an American-born Sikh man fighting a lifetime of racism, violence, and self-doubt after donning a superhero uniform. I'll discuss the health impacts of childhood trauma, racism in health, as well as the health outcomes within the South Asian community. Let's get started. Hey everyone, it's Dr. Lipi. How are you? Today's show is going to be very, very special. I'm in the home of a pretty big celebrity chef, Vikas Khanna. You know him from MasterChef India. He's a Michelin star awarded chef. He's incredibly kind, generous, and talented. And I'm here with Vishavjit Singh, who's a filmmaker and cartoonist. And we're here to talk about their film, which is going to be an Oscar contender called American Sikh. You see the name here, here's the poster, and it'll become pretty clear once I start talking to these two gentlemen why me as a doctor, why I'm interested in their film. So gentlemen, pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, same here. Thank you for having us.
And thank you for taking the time to talk about this important project. Why don't we start with you, Vishavjit? Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about you and a little bit about this film?
Yeah, I live in New York City right now, born in Washington, D.C., spent most of my childhood in India, moved back, L.A., started college in Ohio, back to California, Connecticut. So I've lived all over. My concept of home is sort of very fluid. Loving family that raised me. My parents have been wonderful, but I've gone through sort of two very big sort of tragedies in my life. The 1984 massacre of Sikhs in India in November, and post 9/11 in the US. And those two have kind of in many sort of unique ways defined how I have made certain choices in life. I've processed certain traumas. 9/11 and the subsequent hate crimes and bias crimes kind of provided the spark for me to become a cartoonist first, performance artist, and now a filmmaker. And through this film, American Sikh, which actually I partnered with a very talented young Sikh filmmaker, Ryan Westrom in Southern California. Yeah. We spent 4 years making this film, 2018 to 2022, post, during COVID. And as part of the process, we had Vikas Khanna join us as one of the executive producers.
And we'll talk more about the film, get into the story of the film and the specific events in your life that prompted you telling this story. Vikas, you're a celebrity chef. You are MasterChef India. My mom and I, we love watching you. You have restaurants in New York City, Janoon. You are, I believe, the first Indian chef to be awarded a Michelin star rating. Why are you involved in this film?
The subject is very close to my heart. I was a teenager when I saw the riots in Amritsar. My best two friends, Rana and Babu, are both Sikhs, and they were childhood friends. Still now, they're my best friends. I saw what happened to their families. I felt like an outsider in my own town. I still have fears of hair burning. I still go through traumas now in life because, I'm an Indian chef, so I have to learn how to put tandoor. So every time you're putting tandoor, your hair will burn. That smell evoked a lot of trauma for me all my childhood, all my growing up years.
And just so people, the viewers understand, what's tandoor?
Tandoor is a big Indian clay oven which has a temperature up to 700 degrees Fahrenheit. And you stick it on the walls of the clay oven, the breads, the dough, and it turns into bread. And for me, that was a very challenging time because I was 13 when I saw 1984 riots in Amritsar. And I've never recovered from that trauma.
And just so people are clear, Amritsar is in the state of Punjab in India.
Yes, in North India.
Yeah.
It's a very important place. The most significant Sikh shrine is in Amritsar, the Golden Temple.
Yeah.
And I learned how to cook there. So in 2013, I recollect, I saw Vishavjit's article in BBC or CNN, where he talked about a superhero. But my grandmother always said that the Sikhs are superhero. They are the protectors of our daughters. They have always been superhero. So every time there's a big disaster happening in the world, they are the first ones who serve them food and water. And she's thinking, but they were all the superheroes. They're Guru Nanak Dev Ji's sons and daughters. It never left my mind. But when I saw the article and I saw the strange comments about the article, that how can a superhero have a beard and turban? I was like, oh my God, I wish I can meet this boy one time.
Yeah.
I need to cook for him. That's the only way I know how to show love.
Yes.
I said, this guy is so brave
Yeah.
to stand and to fight hate by love
Yeah.
and by compassion.
Yeah.
And for me, he has my heart since that day.
Well, just listening to and watching you talk, it's very clear how emotional this whole story, this film, based on your own personal childhood experiences back in India, how it's affected you personally and professionally. And through your cooking, which is your love, how you express love, you're telling a story when you cook. Similarly, as a cartoonist, as a filmmaker, you're clearly telling a story. So why don't you, if you don't mind, Vishavjit, tell the story of the film. It's an animated short, and then what really the stories that happened to you in India and that prompted, and then the superhero thing that he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, so, Ryan had approached me. He had done a live action documentary almost 10 years ago on my performance artwork, the Captain America work. That really blew up. And so he came to New York City, followed me while I'm dressed up as Captain America, and had some really interesting experiences, mostly positive. But then once I took my uniform off, somebody within minutes called me Osama bin Laden. And that's what Ryan tells me. He's like, when I saw them, like, okay, you hear these stories, but when you experience them, it just has a huge impact. So it stayed with him. Somehow he followed my life story and comes to me a few years later saying, okay, I captured your Captain America story, but I want to tell you life stories. Okay, let's do it. We decided very early on, there's two tragedies that are going to be happy to be part of the story, the 1984 massacre and 9/11. Doing any tragedy live action, it's going to take an emotional toll. It's complicated. We chose animation because it just gives you more creative freedom, leaves a lot to the imagination. We don't want to traumatize people who are watching the film, but at the same time realize, something like this did happen. It had an impact on me. So we decided we're going to do an animation. We have spent hundreds of hours together on the phone, in person at times, just drawing the story out. And we knew, we did not have funds for a full feature length. So we raised funds for a short film. And so the challenge is, okay, which parts of your story we tell, which we do not. I give a lot of credit to Ryan for sort of pulling out the essential parts. The story starts with 1984. It kind of travels, I'm a shy, skinny, introverted kid, still am, although I might not appear anymore. I dress up as Captain America, but I am. And so I got bullied a lot as a kid, kept it inside, didn't tell anyone. And then, of course, 84 happens. I come back to the US, first to Los Angeles, and this is, land of my birth. I'm thinking, hey, I'm American, this is home. Well, I didn't get that reception. So I got, strangers told me to go back home, call me names. So I took out my turban and beard. I had an identity crisis. I'm like, I want to fit in. I want to be an American, right? So you try to change yourself to fit in, which I know a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
Had a 10-year journey to sort of find my place, be comfortable in my skin. And actually so this is something that's not in the film because you have to make choices. Books were my savior. The stories from the past and present, Buddhism, Taoism, spiritual traditions from South Asia sort of kept me grounded.
Yeah.
Eventually decided in my late 20s, I'm going to embrace this faith that I was born into. And so just a month before, so the time is August 2001, I've donned my turban back on after 10 years, and I'm living very close to New York City. and then 9/11 happens.
Yes.
And boy, it was, I will say, right next to 1984 was one of the most difficult times of my life.
Because when September 11th happened, I mean, it was all about Osama bin Laden and the Taliban, and for most people who are not of the Middle Eastern Indian faith, they see somebody with anything wrapping around their head, like Osama bin Laden and the Taliban, or someone Sikh, they conflate it all, it's all the same, and you were the victim of attacks, verbal and physical.
Yeah. So luckily, you know, I didn't have any physical attacks, non-stop verbal attacks. I have family members, friends who were physically attacked.
Yes.
A friend of mine was one of the first Sikhs to be arrested just because he happened to be sick in the hours after 9/11, pulled out of a train. Of course, he was released soon, but, and yeah, so that targeting has, right now, I know Sikhs who are being targeted because we have the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that it is going through its surge. And yeah, so that had a huge impact. For me, fortunately, a cartoon by a Pulitzer Prize winning cartoonist, Mark Fiore, he created a cartoon responding to the hate crimes that many, not just Sikhs, Muslims, Hindus, anybody who could pass for Hispanics, Latinos, I mean, you could fit that stereotype, brown skin, a little bit of hair, and boy, you were a fair target. I saw this cartoon that was capturing my predicament. And a great sketch of a Sikh man. I'm like, oh my God, this is cool. And it took a few weeks and months, and I'm like, well, maybe I should learn how to do cartooning and capture my people's predicaments. So I started doing that, taught myself how to become a cartoonist. I call my cartoons Sikh tunes, so they're full of turban and beards. And that was, you know, something I did by the night. I was an engineer by day, and somehow there was a global audience that responded to it. And then teachers were responding to, educators were responding to it. And then 10 years down the line, the first Captain America movie came out. I saw a poster, a Marvel poster. I'm like, you know what? Captain America should have a turban and beard. So I sketched a poster for my first trip to the New York City Comic Con, which is one of the big comic festivals. And people saw that poster. And it was not somebody who looked like me, but had a turban and beard, Captain America turban and beard. And people were like, interesting. Some people were confused. Some people didn't like it, but it started conversations. Somebody, a photographer, a New York-based photographer, Fiona Booth, she's Jewish, Brazilian, Arab American, said to me, Vishavjit, you should dress up as Captain America next year. And I said to her, no. Why? Because I've been traumatized. As a kid, as a post-9/11 adult, people already just singled me out. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. She spent a year trying to convince me to don that uniform. And what came, and I know you've spoken about this earlier, we've talked about this, the Milwaukee massacre at a Gurdwara where a white supremacist killed 6 Sunday worshippers. Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And huge impact on me. I wrote an op-ed in Seattle Times, and she read that op-ed and said, Vishavjit, please reconsider. Let's do this photo shoot. Let's do a social experiment. So I donned the uniform 10 years to the year. June.
So I mean, the Captain America thing is fascinating. I mean, I never would have predicted that.
Love it.
So everyone needs to see this film, by the way. American Sikh, it's just a 9-minute film, animated film. It's on the website, americansikhfilm.com, and we'll repeat that at the end of the episode. But at the start of it, I never would have predicted that was what happened. But let's just take a step back, and I want to bring you in too, Vikas, here. But tell me, Vishavjit, it sounds like you had exposure to early trauma. You both witnessed traumatizing events, violence, verbal, physical, people dying, people getting attacked. I'm curious, now looking back as grown adult men looking back, how do you think witnessing and experiencing those traumatizing events as children impacted you growing up, and how has it affected your mental, physical health and well-being today? I'll start with you.
Yeah, you know, I mean, so 84 for me was the big one, right? I mean, that is when we had a self-imposed curfew right after. My dad actually, we were in the capital, Delhi. My dad worked for the Indian government, has all his life.
You were a child then, right?
I was a child, yeah. We were the same age, and I was a child. I was, just going to be 13. So my parents, self-imposed curfew, they're like, something's going to happen. We just don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And I remember seeing a cop who, in the morning hours of November 1st, when Gandhi was assassinated on October 31st, and I saw cops, pointing a gun in the distance. So I felt actually comfort. I'm like, oh, they're here to protect us. And of course, by the end of the day, we had a mob that came to our house, to have us, pulled out. Luckily for us, kids playing cricket, my friend and my older brother's friend, they somehow talked this mob out of attacking us because we were living in a government-owned housing, which is the irony of it was incredible. But for the next few days, we know so much happened. Thousands of Sikhs were killed in the most horrible ways. I'll be honest with you, we don't talk much about it. My parents, I don't remember much in terms of, did we really have conversations? My parents considered living in Delhi, going back to Punjab, close to their family. They didn't, eventually they said, okay, fine, we'll just live here. We haven't had honest conversations. That's unfortunately, I don't know, it's Desi culture, South Asian culture, we don't talk about it. So I have, it was really in adulthood when I became an artist, when I became a cartoonist, that I really started talking about expressing, my trauma, whatever you want to call it, through art. And then on the side, getting bullied as a kid, as a skinny kid, people called me all kinds of names. I mean, I heard in 3 different languages, mostly in Hindi and Punjabi, and in English, the versions of being an ugly kid, because that's what people saw me as with my glasses. My brother, who happens to be a better looking kid, he's the only one who did not bully me, but everybody else, even like sometimes, people who love you, they can in their own ways compare you to your siblings and say, why can't you be as good looking as you? And that sunk in, and I have spent most of my life sort of overcompensating for how do I show my worth?
Yes.
So for me, the goal was go to the best schools, best colleges in America. That's what I did. So University of California, Berkeley, I think I've gotten over this thanks to my wife of 20 years. But those two, 84 and being told that I'm ugly many times, it took a toll.
So, Vikas, you've also been very open about witnessing trauma early on. You've also been open about how in your adult life, just loss that you've experienced in your own family with your sister. My own father passed away earlier this year. How do you think that both early and especially the early childhood trauma that you experienced, how do you think that manifested and affected you?
So, I'm not survivor. I witnessed consciously and subconsciously 5 wars. I was born during India-Pakistan war in 1971, and the stories of my mom telling me that how this is Amritsar is a border city, that how the hospital and everything was full, and the doctor noticed that my feet are not aligned. So my mother, when I was just 1 week old, figured out that she needs to take me to Delhi to show to a doctor. Yeah. And at that time, total country was in emergency. And then 1984 happened, and then I went to Bombay to do my first training in the kitchen. And then 1992 riots happened when a Muslim woman rescued me. And then after that, I saw the Sikh Pandits who came to Amritsar, leaving their homes back in Kashmir. I saw their stories. And then I come to America, 9/11 happens. Yeah. So, you feel that, sometimes there's so much of pain, and then I learned a word which might help people who are listening to us. It's called sublimation. That you take all this pain and brokenness and you put all that energy into creating something majestic and marvelous in honor of those who you lost on the way, or maybe just to honor for those who survived all this. Yes.
It sounds to me, clearly, both of you have used art as one type of outlet. Because you and I have talked about how we both view food as medicine. I most certainly do. Absolutely. There's something so therapeutic about food. You talked about you express love by cooking, right? You enjoy it. It is, I think, part of your DNA. You are an artist. You draw, and it sounds to me that you both find cooking, drawing, you find art healing. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I mean, I used it to sort of express my frustration and anger, and then people connect with that art, right? That's where the joy happens, because people who either are going through your experience or who can empathize and say, I'm sorry, Vishavjit, that you have to go through this. And I've heard that from people. But I'm also trying to connect to people who are judging me because they don't know my story. And I know I don't know their story, right? That's something I've learned, just over time through these tragedies. Human beings can be really mean to each other, like really mean to each other. based on labels and boxes we put each other in.
Yeah.
But they don't realize our stories can connect us.
Absolutely.
And so that is one of the essence that I've learned hard way, and also through the traditions that I'm raised in, the spiritual traditions out of South Asia, which is we have a lot in common.
Yes.
So yes, I use cartooning and performance art to connect with people, and I've had the most strangest of interactions. Good in many ways. My art, I say I've learned to confuse people through my art, especially through my Captain America art. And confusion is good because it people are like, okay, wait a minute, what's going on? And then it opens space for conversation.
And it forces people to just stop.
Yes.
Like you can't. The human brain cannot process all these things. And when something doesn't make sense, like the neural networks are like, whoa, wait, stop, and they have to it takes time to process.
So
and you just talked about storytelling. You're using cartoon, film. You use food as a vehicle for storytelling. And you use a C word, connection. Most of my viewers know that I'm also an addiction medicine doctor, and in my field, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. Because so many people who face problems with drugs and alcohol and other substances, who develop a substance use disorder, they unfortunately do not seek the help that they need and deserve because of shame and stigma. We also know that the racism that you clearly have experienced, I've experienced, so many people that are ethnic minorities, visible ethnic minorities experience. We know that racism is truly a health problem. It's actually a health crisis. We know that people of color, communities of color disproportionately face higher, bigger, larger health problems. Heart disease, cancer, stroke, you name it. And the people of color, of different racial and ethnic minorities, do not get the help that they need because doctors and healthcare communities have innate racism built in, structural racism. There's that, and then you both talk about the trauma. And this is where, as a doctor, I'm fascinated, not from the racism as a health problem, but also the impact that trauma has on the brain, especially as children. And when you're a kid, you don't know, you didn't know the word trauma. Oh, I'm witnessing a violent act. This is traumatizing me. You don't know how to process that when you're a kid, but we know now through science that traumatizing events, highly stressful events, change the brain. And if it's not addressed as a child or as a teenager, even as an adult, it can manifest in ways that are harmful to us and to others. So, in terms of like mental health and mental well-being, or mental or physical, what do you feel has helped you moving forward? And I'll start with you, Vishavjit.
Yeah, I would say, I'm fortunate and lucky to have very loving parents. They're not perfect parents, but loving parents, right? They have their vulnerabilities, but loving parents. They kept me, always had my back. I have an older brother who's thick and thin. We fought as kids, but he's always had my back. I think what sort of shielded me from the trauma of 1984 is just having a very loving sort of core presence.
That support.
Very much.
Yeah.
Although we didn't talk about
Yeah.
that trauma. I'm sure that trauma impacted my parents as well, and my brother as well.
Yeah.
But we didn't talk, but we took care of each other. And,
Yes.
and I would also say they were kind people. I would say it's very important. Have a community, and it doesn't have to be your parents. It doesn't have to be a sibling. It can be a friend. It can be somebody you know at work, but somebody you can open up about your vulnerabilities.
Yes.
That's important.
Having that sense of support, that sense of community, again, doesn't have to be your biological family. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's the biological family that's the source of the pain and trauma. Many of my patients have expressed that. But that support is almost as effective, if not more so, than like a medicine. You know. Vikas, what about you? How have you processed? What would you say has helped you today in terms of dealing with that early kind of trauma, and even to this day, all the stressors that you deal with? I mean, you're a celebrity chef, you're world famous, you receive criticism and hatred from social media from all over. How do you deal with that?
I just feel that I focus on the opportunity which I have, and I feel that sometimes telling the most compassionate stories, most honest, most authentic, it's a way forward for people to understand each other.
Yeah.
The root cause of so much of hate right now we're experiencing in America and around the world is actually having no compassion. And compassion comes from empathy, I feel. The answer to hate cannot be hate. The answer to hate has to be empathy. Has to be way of educating people who we are. And then we went to almost all the Ivy League colleges, and we went to White House with it. We screened it there. It was amazing for me to be called at the Oxford University to speak about this. So for me, it was like, okay, you can't reach the world, but at least you're reaching a group of students' minds. And then they showed the movie in schools in America. And for me, it was like, wow, they called me to Harvard and said that you got to let's do a langar here. We did a langar at Times Square. So everybody's asking, what's the purpose of all that? This is very small. I'm like, you know what? Trust me, a seed is very small too.
Yes.
If you truly endure the power of adversities, and you understand that a seed comes from this small space, and today we are surviving because of big trees.
If you think about it, like the three of us, yes, we're all South Asian, we're of Indian descent, we have certain commonalities, that's for sure, but we're also very different, right? I'm a woman born in Toronto, Canada, go Leafs go. I'm a doctor, you're an artist, you're a chef, you're a cartoonist, filmmaker, but I guarantee you people watching will resonate with everything that we've all said, because what we're talking about is so universal. Pain and trauma and suffering, loss, grief, these are all universal. I think, and what you were saying, Vikas, about making that film, but really rooted in food and in cooking, which is so much about love and connection, bringing people from all walks of life together. I think storytelling is what's universal. Sharing your stories about what you've been through, the difficulties, the ups and downs, everybody can relate to that, right? And I think this film, folks, I watched it, I loved it. You can just keep on watching it again and again. Yeah. It's so beautifully done. It's so simple, but it's so, I think the fact that it's made through animation and cartoons for me makes it more approachable. Children can watch it, teenagers, they'll all be able to relate to it, because you talk about your upbringing as a little boy in India and in the United States, I believe, and everyone can relate to that. But there's the great music that makes it dramatic. Yeah. You build up the tension and the surprise. It's just so beautifully done. And then folks, I'm not going to give it away. You gotta watch it when he dons the Captain America uniform, and the reaction of complete strangers. It doesn't matter your color, skin, where you're born. People have pain and suffering, but people also human beings crave love and empathy and connection, right? So on that note, Vishavjit, tell people how they can see this film.
So right now, for a limited time, you can watch this film on AmericanSikhFilm.com. That's our website. And we're hoping soon, next year, 2024, it'll be available on a bigger platform so people around the globe can watch it. But for now, please visit our website, and you're gonna, as Dr. Roy said, it's gonna be you're gonna find a connection to it. That's the key here. Is the storytelling that we're trying to do is we all have intersecting connections in our stories, and you're going to find a connection.
And because you were also saying that there was somebody involved in the film who won an Oscar already, I believe last year, for The Elephant Whisperer. What's their name?
Guneet Monga.
And how is Guneet involved?
So Guneet is like a sister, mentor, one of my most important spiritual person I know in my life. We are both, for us, it's both go-to people. And when this project was brought to her attention, and she's saying that you have to be part of it. This is a story which aligns with your story. People are so busy reporting on wars, but nobody reports on these kids who witness wars. Yeah. Their trauma, their pain. Many of them break down, and forever they are scarred. Yeah. But very few kids like Vishavjit and me who had amazing support from back home, where my grandmom and his parents, they filled up the gaps of that emptiness. Yeah. But many kids will feel trauma for the rest of their lives.
And this film, it's correct me if I'm wrong, but it's an Oscar contender. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's qualified for the Oscars. We are trying to get it now shortlisted, on the way to getting nominated. So yes, shortlisting is in December, nomination is in January. So yeah, we're trying to amplify the message of this film. And Vikas and Guneet actually have been our cheerleaders and troopers in that campaign.
Why are you laughing?
Oh, because he asked me, so I'm a real hustler in real sense.
He is.
Like for me, 24 hours do not mean 24
He does not
hours. I
sleep.
divide the 24 hours by seconds. But this is the amount of seconds you have, guys. So I said, for me, it's only one wish to see a Sikh brother climb up the steps of the Oscars and tell the world who we are.
Isn't that
For me, that moment, I don't know, I'm going to have a breakdown.
Yes.
For me, it's very clear.
A good breakdown, and he'll have full of support. I will be there. I honestly, I see delight when you're laughing. You're laughing with delight and a sense of pride and joy.
Of course.
Folks, please join me when I thank these two very talented, incredible gentlemen for telling their story. Vishavjit Singh, Vikas Khanna, thank you so much. I plan on telling this story again and again because these themes are universal. And as a doctor who's taking care of so many patients who've had similar struggles, they may not be identical stories, but the stories of pain and suffering and violence and trauma, but also of support, of connection. That could be, and it also could be formally professional help through therapy, medications, but this sense of connection is vital and it's life-saving, and so is art and cooking. All of this is therapeutic. So thank you very much, both of you, for sharing your story.
Thank you for having us, Dr. Roy.
Wow. I am still reeling from my interview with Vishavjit Singh and Vikas Khanna about their childhoods, their careers, and how they're using art and cooking to combat their experiences of childhood trauma and racism in the United States and in India. Vikas and Vishavjit are changing the face of Sikh representation in the United States and beyond. As a physician and public health advocate, this film resonated with me on 3 levels. First, both Vikas and Vishavjit experienced childhood trauma, which has both short and long-term health effects. Did you know that early childhood trauma can change the brain? The prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and amygdala have been found to be different in traumatized children compared to children with no reported trauma. Early trauma exposure has been linked to an increased risk of both mental and physical health problems, such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, heart disease, obesity, and chronic pain syndromes. The good news is that early intervention can make a big difference. Specialized health, education, and therapeutic services can help both children and adults who have experienced traumatizing events. Second, race and ethnic-based violence has affected both Vishavjit and Vikas. Make no mistake, racism is a public health issue. It is a key structural determinant of health, creating disparities in education, housing, employment, and equal justice. Racial inequity in these areas pose serious threats to health, with disproportionate occurrences of diabetes, stress, maternal mortality, hypertension, obesity, asthma, and heart disease among people of color. Third, as a doctor of Indian descent interviewing 2 fellow Indians, I need to discuss health outcomes among South Asians, who are people with ancestry from Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, the Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Members of the South Asian community have a high prevalence of hypertension and type 2 diabetes and have higher levels of lipoprotein A, a type of cholesterol associated with an increased risk of heart disease and stroke. Data also shows that 1 in 5 South Asians in the United States report experiencing a mood or anxiety disorder in their lifetime, with women reporting higher levels of distress than men. So what can you do? Well, for a limited time, you can watch American Sikh online. Just go to americansikhfilm.com. The link is also in the description. You can also learn more about and volunteer for organizations such as SAKI for South Asian Women, South Asian Awareness Network, or SAN, National Collaborative for Health Equity, and the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. Well, that's all for today. Here's your joke of the day, Indian theme. Why do Indians like basketball? Because of Steph Curry. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, write comments below, and follow my Instagram at Health, Humor, Harmony, Dr. Roy. Be well. I'll see you soon.